She came to tell the stories of those the world forgot, only to disappear herself in a place no one can even name. Kamira Johnson was a young photographer from Baltimore. She didn't vanish into darkness. She faded into the fading light of day, chasing the quiet beauty of a Louisiana swamp at sunset. Her phone was found a week later, placed neatly atop an unfinished map. No one knows what happened after. The final message she sent her: "Mother, the weather's beautiful. Everything's going to be okay." But everything wasn't okay. You're watching Hidden Echoes, where we uncover the stories the source of like get, media left behind, and the people quietly erased from the world. If you believe every story deserves to be told, join us as we delve deeper into the disappearance of Kamira Johnson. Kamira Johnson, 27, was a freelance photojournalist living in Baltimore. She grew up in Cherry Hill, a low-income neighborhood filled with warmth and resilience. Her mother, Rochelle, worked night shifts as a nurse and raised 2 children on her own after Kamira's older brother was killed in a gas explosion at their old apartment building. Kamira was just 15 at the time. Kamira didn't take pictures for fame. She photographed to preserve the truth in people's lives. A market, worker at sunrise, a child laughing. In the street, an elderly woman folding clothes outside old Josita's laundromat. Her work had been featured in several community exhibitions around Baltimore. Some said she photographed like she was trying to protect the souls of those she loved. Before she vanished, Kamira had planned a personal project, a 3-week journey through the Atchafalaya Basin in Louisiana, home to both Creole and Taud, Black communities living in deep connection with the land. She named the project Black in the Etched, Water, a raw, intimate look at life. In this often overlooked region, Kamira rented a small wooden cabin near St. Martinville, a quiet town of fewer than 7,000 people. Those who saw her in the days before she disappeared remembered her soft smile, her ever-present camera, and how she would sit in silence by the water at dusk, staring toward the cypress groves as if listening for something. In her journal, Kamira once wrote, "There's something here calling to me, not just the light, but something shapeless. I need to see it." On June 18th, 2023, at around 5:30 p.m., an elderly, local couple, Mr. and Mrs. Dubois, saw Kamira for the last time. They were paddling their canoe past a narrow branch of the Atchafalaya basin near Pointe Noire when they spotted her. Kamira was sitting alone on a large, exposed tree root that jutted over the water, the golden light of sunset filtering through the trees, casting her entire body in a warm, amber glow. Her camera rested beside her, notebook open and a folded paper, map held down by a small stone. She looked peaceful, like she had just found something, Mrs. Dubois recalled, her voice dropping. But there was also something strange, like she was waiting for someone. About an hour later, as dusk settled in, Kamira failed to send her usual check-in. She had a routine using an offline GPS app to send daily updates to her mother, mostly just to keep her from worrying. But that night, no signal came through. At first, her mother, Rochelle, wasn't alarmed. Kamira had lost service before, even once taking until the next morning to get a message out. But by the following afternoon, and then another day after that, with still no word, Rochelle knew something was wrong. She was always on time, always responsible. Even with a migraine or in bad weather, she'd let me know. That was our promise to each other. By the 3rd day, a local Alta police were notified. They visited Kamira's rented cabin, a small secluded spot tucked nearly 2 miles into the woods outside town. Inside, everything looked untouched. A few slices of dry bread in the kitchen, a neatly made bed, charging cables still plugged in. Her camera was missing, but her laptop remained open with a photo folder labeled Dark Waters, the working title of her project. A paper map left on the desk had a red circle marking a narrow stretch of swamp. Next to it, a handwritten note. Read, left at the dead. Eucalyptus. Approx. 1.2 miles. Above that, in blue ink, something glowing. Recheck. Tomorrow evening. Back at the site. Near the water, the search team found a small footprint pressed into the soft mud, and beside it, a etched, long drag mark, as if something heavy had been pulled. There was no blood, no sign of a struggle, just Kamira's wide-brimmed hat, tangled in a low branch, still wet, with early morning dew, led by Lieutenant Claire Monroe of the St. Martin Parish Sheriff's Office. The search was broken into 2-mile radius sectors of the swamp. They used drones, airboats, everything they had. But the wider they searched, the quieter the woods became. No kayat, no signs of resistance. Just wind, mud, and a lingering feeling that this place didn't want to give up its secrets. One volunteer, Malik Henry, a former rescue diver, who lived near the wildlife refuge, noted a shallow creek where sunlight streamed through the trees. At noon, he recognized it from one of Kamira's photos on her private Instagram account shared only with close friends. When zoomed in, the photo revealed a faint silhouette beyond the tall reeds, someone or something standing just out of focus. That marked the first time suspicions arose of another presence. Kamira's family confirmed she had no travel companion, no scheduled interviews in the area. The question surfaced, who was out there with her? And if someone was, why didn't anyone know? Another unsettling detail came from Kamira's location app. While no messages were sent, the etched device did record one final set of GPS coordinates before going silent. Those coordinates, according to internal police maps, didn't match the spot where her phone was eventually found, which meant the phone had either been moved or deliberately placed. And if someone placed it, who were they and what did they want from her disappearance? 1 week after Kamira vanished, a park ranger named Elias Brooks, stationed over 3 miles from the site, reported seeing strange lights in the etched treetops to the east on the very night of June 18th. He described them as flashes, rapid but silent, lasted maybe 7 to 10 seconds. Elias, with 27 years of experience and full knowledge of every kind of night gear, drone, and natural reflection, insisted, "I've never seen anything like that." The report wasn't included in the official case file due to lack of corroborating evidence. But days later, search crews found something odd, a small oval mirror set into a locket buried deep in the mud. No name, no scratches, like it had just been dropped. Rochelle confirmed she'd never seen her daughter wear it. DNA and fingerprint analysis were inconclusive. It became one of the case's many unclaimed clues. From there, unease rippled outward. Locals began to speculate, had someone been watching Kamira, luring her into one of the map's blank zones? Some old hunters warned of hidden branches in the swamp, places that had been sealed off long ago. No way out, they'd said. What haunted people most was Kamira's final photo, still stored in her cloud server, a backlit image taken in the middle of calm water. In it, 2 shadows appear, hers, and another, shorter figure, standing slightly turned, just far, enough away to know it wasn't her. That photo was never posted. As the official search entered its second week, patience began to wear thin, but that was also when the smallest, seemingly unimportant details started to surface. A clerk at a convenience store near the Pecan Hollow gas station, about 3 miles from Kamira's cabin, decided to check security footage after hearing about the disappearance. At 6:42 a.m. on June 18th, the video clearly showed Kamira entering the store, buying 2 bottles of spring water and a bag of cashews. She wore a beige long-sleeved shirt, jeans, and the same wide-brimmed hat later found at the scene. But what the clerk couldn't forget was her eyes. She smiled politely, real soft. But there was something in her eyes, like she was worried. She looked around twice before walking away from the counter. Local police retrieved the footage, but didn't release it publicly. Instead, 2 investigators were assigned to retrace Kamira's route from the store back to her cabin. Along the way, they found tire tracks on a side trail leading into the northern swamp, a remote area with no access to ranger stations. The tracks were too wide for Kamira's vehicle, most likely from an off-road pickup or SUV with specialty mud tires. No one in the area reported owning such a vehicle that day. Another red flag emerged from Kamira's handwritten journal, still open on her cabin desk. An entry dated June 17th read, "Someone asked for directions while I was on the porch. No gear, no greeting. Just asked, where's the turnoff to? The backwater?" I pointed them somewhere else, just in case. The note wasn't signed, but the handwriting matched the same blue ink used in her map annotations the day she disappeared. Yet this detail was left out of the hush. Preliminary investigation. Later, a responding officer, speaking anonymously, confirmed. It was deemed irrelevant. No one else reported seeing a bucket up a stranger that day. And there's no exterior camera at the cabin. At this point, the community began to ask, had Kamira really been alone during her entire trip, or was someone following her? Someone no one had noticed. These questions didn't stay speculative for long. They began to crack open inconsistencies in how the investigation was handled, and the silence from law enforcement started to erode public trust, especially for Kamira's family. On June 22nd, a volunteer search team made up of local residents and Kamira's friends from Baltimore, including Maya Holloway, her close friend and collaborator, on many community projects, scanned the western shoreline of the swamp. While following Kamira's paper map, they discovered a faint path, like a makeshift trail possibly used for camping or resting. Oddly, this area didn't appear on any official map or on Kamira's planned route. Etched into a low tree trunk near Bottomchairs, the water's edge was a rough carving, Tracy. It didn't match the name of anyone Kamira knew and had never been mentioned in the investigation. Back at the cabin, Maya noticed something else. Kamira's personal tablet used for quick photo backups was missing. It wasn't in the cabin nor listed among items recovered by police. When she asked Rochelle about it, her response was instant. She always carried it. She once lost nearly an entire photo series because she didn't back up in time. The discovery was reported to law enforcement, but their response was, there's no sign of forced entry at the cabin. What truly reignited concern, though, came from Henri Leclerc, Ajaf's boat guide who lived near the swamp and often took tourists through the lesser-known waterways. He claimed to have seen a girl dressed like Kamira standing on the old wooden footbridge the same afternoon she disappeared, and saw that she wasn't alone, he said. There was a man with her, dark jacket. I didn't see his face, but when I paddled closer, they were gone. At first, authorities dismissed Leclerc's account as unreliable without supporting evidence. But Maya didn't agree. I believe Henri. He's lived on this water his whole life. He doesn't make up stories. And what he saw lines up with something Kamira told me days earlier. I think someone walked into the woods while I was shooting sunset. I heard footsteps, but I couldn't see anyone. 2 versions of the Solpas, same afternoon, one from a store's security camera, one from a man who lived beside the swamp, and one of it, from Kamira's own words, began to form a haunting gap, a gap shaped like someone else, someone who was never identified, but who always seemed just a few steps behind her. On July 1st, exactly 2 weeks after Kamira vanished, a strange phone call came through to her mother's cell phone at 3:12 a.m. It lasted 18 seconds. No one spoke, just the sound of wind and a faint trickle of water, like someone standing near a stream. Rochelle later said she thought she imagined it, but when she replayed the recording, something slid through at the 13th second, a whisper, faint, distorted, and nearly indecipherable. She gave it to a friend, an audios technician who cleaned the background noise. After several minutes of silence, he finally said, "It might say go, back, or beneath, but it's not clear enough to be sure." Police were informed that same day, but concluded it was likely a prank call due to the signal being routed through a secondary tower near the swamp where reception is, often unstable. Still, for Rochelle and Maya, the recording became a source of haunting doubt. What if it was her? Maya said. What if she was trying to tell us where she was and we just couldn't hear it? During a second sweep around the cabin, searchers discovered something wedged between the back porch floorboards, a linen handkerchief, hand embroidered, not Kamira's style. It carried a faint lipstick mark. No DNA could be matched, and the fabric didn't resemble anything else in her belongings. Like the pendant found earlier, it became another clue with no name. The deeper the search went, dans passage, more the investigation twisted into a maze. Those who once believed Kamira had simply gotten lost or met with an accident began to shift. It felt like someone or something had been present, watching, quietly intervening in her journey, but with no camera footage, no new messages, and no verified witness. To any second person, the investigation had nowhere to go, until a town hall meeting when an elderly woman named Celeste stood up and spoke. Years ago, she said, in that same stretch of swamp, her 17-year-old sister disappeared while hiking with friends. She stepped off the path to check on some glowing blue lights in the trees and never came back. That case was never reopened. There's something out in those waters that isn't on any watch map, Celeste said, and it always seems to choose women who walk alone. One late afternoon in early August, nearly 6 weeks after Kamira disappeared, Maya and her friend Terrence, a former GIS technician who once worked with Louisiana's mapping division, decided to do what authorities had never publicly done: compare unsolved missing person cases within a 10-mile radius of the Atchafalaya basin over the last 15 years. They weren't expecting much, but the data they uncovered left them frozen. At least 4 other women of color, aged 18 to 32, had vanished in the etched area under unexplained circumstances. 3 were independent travelers or photographers. None of the cases had ever been fully investigated. One name appeared again and again in scattered local news reports: Emmy Caldwell, a 25-year-old woman who went missing in 2015 while photographing life in the swamps. In an old news segment, Maya found a brief interview with a man who introduced himself as Vernon Thibodeau at the time, living just 2 miles from the basin, working as a freelance pump mechanic. He claimed to have seen Emmy the afternoon she disappeared and warned she shouldn't have gone alone. The clip aired once and was never followed up. When Maya searched the name in state databases, Vernon's record showed something unexpected. He hadn't lived in the said area since 2016. He had once been arrested for stalking at another state park, but the case was dropped due to lack of evidence. What chilled Maya and Terrence was when they compared an archived photo of Vernon, blurry and aged, with Leclerc's description of the man in the dark coat seen standing on the wooden bridge, gaunt face, tall frame. More disturbing still, in Vernon's 2015 photo, he wore a jacket with the logo of a swamp pump company, the same kind of logo Terrence believed he saw faintly, reflected in Kamira's final photo, an oval shape near the left shoulder, barely visible in the water's surface. They turned over everything to the police, but the reply was firm. Vernon Thibodeau no longer resides in the area and is not currently wanted. There is no basis to open a formal investigation. Maya was stunned. Do we have to wait for another person to disappear before anyone acts? She wrote. Does the truth have to drown in? Silence, like everything else, out. Here, murky, still hiding something, nameless. Maya couldn't let it go. She dug deeper into Vernon's past, through local Facebook groups and forums dedicated to unsolved disappearances in the American South. In a small forum called Forgotten Paths, she found a 2017 thread where an anonymous user recounted being tailed by a silver-haired man in a gray jacket driving an old pickup while kayaking near the western branch of the Atchafalaya. The poster said she stopped to rest along the shore, and the man stood in the distance staring at her without moving for over 15 minutes. When she pretended to make a phone call for help, he turned around and drove off without a word. Maya traced the post to its author, a woman named Keisha from Baton Rouge, who still remembered the encounter vividly. When Maya sent her the old photo of Vernon, Keisha went silent for a long time. Then she said, I'm not sure, but that look, the way he stared, I've never forgotten it. Even with another witness confirming a shared sense of danger, there was still no solid evidence to officially link Vernon to Kamira's case. No DNA, no footage, no direct eyewitness during the disappearance. Vernon remained like a shadow, enough to haunt the edges, never enough to face the light. Maya returned to the police with all of it. This time, a younger officer pulled her aside and whispered, look, Vernon's not without a file, but out here, there are things people won't touch unless they're certain. You understand? That sentence hit Maya like a punch. She understood too well. Here was a man with a known history of stalking, who had once lived near where 4 women of color vanished, described consistently by at least 2 people, and still no formal investigation. It wasn't just frustration anymore. It felt like something was being kept quiet on purpose. Vernon had become a symbol of all the invisible forces behind Kamira's disappearance. The reflected figure in her final photo, the whisper on the midnight test call, the nameless clues no one would acknowledge. In her journal, Maya wrote, I don't know if Vernon did it, but I know something's wrong. And sometimes silence is the loudest warning sign. After being dismissed for the second time by law enforcement, Maya reached out to an independent media outlet she had worked with years ago, one that specialized in overlooked missing persons cases. Within 48 hours of publishing a detailed investigative piece connecting Vernon to the disappearances around the Atchafalaya, the story exploded. Thousands shared the post. Then something unexpected arrived. A handwritten letter sent to the newsroom from an elderly woman, Opelousas, about 40 miles from the search site. In it, she wrote that Vernon had once lived near her in the early 2000s. There was something off about him, always asking about strangers, always wanted to know who was going, where, and if they were alone. One time I saw him watching my daughter through the fence while she played in the yard. The letter bore no email or phone number. It was simply signed YJ, but the careful handwriting, specific details, and tone of quiet concern made Maya stop cold. This wasn't someone looking for attention. It was someone who'd carried a worry for decades and couldn't keep silent after seeing that name again. Still, even when Maya brought the letter to police, their answer didn't change. We need more than indirect testimony to reopen a case. The helplessness turned into a quiet, heavy despair, not just because Kamira was still missing, but because everything seemed to be sinking into a deliberate kind of forgetting. Vernon Thibodeau remained a man, with no warrant, no charges, no arrest. He wasn't a ghost. He was still out there, somewhere. And no one wanted to say his name aloud. Even truth itself seemed to start receding. In Maya's final interview with Mr. Leclerc, the boatman who saw Kamira, On the bridge, he looked out across the still water and said softly, "There are things in these woods. They don't leave. They just change hiding spots." He didn't name anyone, but the chill in his words lingered, as if no one was ever truly safe, as long as they believed light alone could drive out the dark. And then, 1 week later, the cabin where Kamira had stayed was broken into. Nothing was stolen except for one item. Her hand-marked paper map was gone. Police suggested it could have been an animal, but Maya didn't buy it. Animals don't unpin maps from walls and roll them up. Summer in the Louisiana swamps slowly gave way to fall. It had been nearly 3 months since Kamira Johnson vanished. Those who once searched tirelessly for her began returning to their own lives. Her name stopped appearing in the news cycle. But for Maya, the case never closed. She returned to Baltimore to rest, but sleep never came easy. Each night, her mind swirled with unanswered questions, fragmented clues, inconsistent statements, and a gnawing gut feeling that something just didn't add up. Then, while rereading Kamira's personal journals, the ones she'd backed up in an emergency email Maya had saved, she stumbled upon a outside line that stopped her cold. It was in an entry dated June 12th. Kamira had written, "Maybe I was wrong to think only people are dangerous." At first, Maya assumed Kamira was referring to alligators, snakes, or other natural hazards. But the paragraphs before that mentioned strange patterns in the light and reflections that didn't match what I remember taking. The Saisat's tone shifted. A new possibility crept in. Was Kamira experiencing a psychological crisis? Maya didn't want to believe. Etched. Kamira was grounded, sharp, resilient. She had survived her brother's death, scholarship, rejections, and the gender bias of the journalism world. But then Maya remembered something else, a late-night call just weeks before Kamira left. Kamira had said, "I feel like someone else is living inside me, like a second shadow." At the time, Maya thought it was a metaphor for a photo essay, maybe. But now, she wasn't so sure. There was no documented history of mental illness. But who could say what happens when someone spends too long alone in a place so quiet, even the smallest? Sounds echo like whispers, light, reflections, the feeling of being watched. These can all point to sensory disorientation. If that were the case, maybe Kamira wandered further than she realized. Maybe she got lost, and no one noticed in time. Maya wrote a simple question in her notebook. If everything which believed is wrong, then what's left? To believe. Are we ready to accept a truth with no villains, only silence, isolation, and an unnamed grief? During a private gathering in Baltimore with Kamira's family, close friends, and a local community organizer, the central question became painfully clear. If accepts, every lead goes nowhere, then what is left? No one wanted to believe. Kamira had simply chosen to disappear, but no one could say with certainty what had really happened. Even the name that had once dominated suspicion, Vernon Thibodeau, faded with no new evidence to support further inquiry. And then came a new revelation that only deepened the confusion. The footprint found in the mud near the swamp site, it wasn't Kamira's. Analysis showed it belonged to someone taller, heavier, likely male. But rather than expanding the investigation, the report was shelved, marked internal only. When Maya asked why, one investigator told her, "We don't know who it belongs to." We didn't want to stir panic, but the silence stirred something worse. If there was another footprint, and Kamira's phone had been left behind, then what did happen to her? Did someone drag her away? Maybe. But why was there no sign of struggle? No blood, no scattered gear? And if she left willingly, why abandon everything? If no one saw her go, then where did she go? As speculation fractured the community, Kamira's mother, Rochelle, withdrew. She stopped attending press briefings, stopped speaking to the media. But in a quiet moment with Maya, she said just one thing. There are things we aren't meant to understand. I just want my daughter to be alive, wherever she is, in whatever form she's in. To Maya, it felt like a blade slipping between the ribs. She realized that even the strongest, most rational minds can lose their bearings when plunged too deep into uncertainty. And when the facts no longer form a clear path, when even the evidence begins to fade, what's left is belief or the need for it. At some point, Maya wasn't sure if she was still investigating a disappearance or just trying to hold on to the memory of a friend in a world that seemed ready to forget her. As autumn turned to winter, hope for finding Kamira intact began to fade like morning mist rising off the swamp. There was no body, no final message, no goodbye, only an absence that stretched out. Like a quiet reminder, sometimes it's what we don't see that haunts us most. On what would have been Kamira's 28th birthday, a nonprofit in Baltimore held a candlelight vigil. No major networks covered it. No police were present, but nearly 200 people came from her classmates, colleagues, neighbors, people she once photographed, all standing together, candles in hand, a collective whisper to the world. Kamira Johnson existed and still exists, in memory, in images, in questions left unanswered. Here at Hidden Echoes, we can't tell you what really happened to Kamira Johnson. We won't claim she was harmed or insist she walked away on her own. But we can say this: a system failed to function the way it should. When a young black woman disappears in a remote place, in a small town, the system often stays quiet. Authorities move slowly. Early signs get brushed aside. Logical leads are ignored because they lack sufficient basis. And in that silence, not darkness, but a kind of cold light, everything seems visible until it vanishes. We believe Kamira wasn't just a victim. She was a reminder that every person deserves to be searched for, to be heard, to be believed. She's proof that if a community doesn't raise its voice, a person can vanish not just from the earth, but from memory. And if we don't tell their stories, what keeps them here with us? That December cold winds swept through the cypress groves, leaving the Atchafalaya basin more hollow, more silent than ever. The search teams had long packed up. The headlines had gone quiet. For many, the story of Kamira Johnson was already a closed chapter, but not for her mother. Every morning still began the same way for Ms. Rochelle, one empty chair at the breakfast table, news playing in the background, just in case, and a phone kept fully charged in case Kamira ever called home. Some days, she'd sit for hours, replaying old voice messages. Simple things. I'm okay, Mom, or I saw a flock of white cranes today. So beautiful. Words that once felt routine were now all she had left to hold on to. Not the photographs, not the articles, but the sound of her daughter's voice, the rhythm, the tone, the way she laughed when describing something silly. Maya made one last trip back to Louisiana, carrying an unprocessed roll of film Kamira had left behind. After much hesitation, she took it to a small old photo lab in New Orleans. Among the developed images, one photograph made her stop cold. It showed a field of reeds at dawn. The light was soft, subdued. In the distance, barely discernible, a figure stood too, blurry to identify, but with a posture strikingly like Kamira's. The photo had no number, no folder, as if it had been taken by a stranger's hand or by Kamira herself. In a moment, she didn't remember. The image didn't offer answers. It didn't need to. It simply existed, like a stitch in a fabric that would never be whole. A fragment not meant to be explained. And like that, this story doesn't end. It simply pauses, like an echo in the forest, whose beginning is lost, and whose reply may never come. At the start of the new year, the The blog Kamira once created to share her project, Black in the Water. Maya uploaded the final photo with just one line of caption. She's still out there, somewhere between the light and the reeds. The post didn't go viral. It didn't spark a wave of shares. But the comments that followed were quiet, kind, from mothers who had lost children, from young women who saw themselves in Kamira's gaze, from other photographers who knew what it meant to seek beauty where others refused to look. That small community, steady, soft-spoken, began raising funds to build a modest wooden marker near the edge of the forest where Kamira once camped, not a grave. You can't bury someone who's never been confirmed gone, but a place to remember. They didn't engrave her full name, just one line. For those whose stories weren't told, and for those still waiting to be found. At Hidden Echoes, we've followed this story from day to one, not because it was sensational, but because it mattered. Among the thousands who disappear, each year, some names are easily set aside because they weren't famous, didn't vanish in a big city, left no cameras rolling, no headlines blazing. But that's exactly why their stories must be told, because they represent the most fragile promise of any society, that every human life, no matter how quiet, deserves to be heard. Kamira may never come back, but her journey, the one to document life in places others had forgotten to chase light through, the darkness of the water remains. And perhaps that's what matters most. Maybe not all disappearances need answers. Maybe what we need is to learn not to look away when someone goes missing. As winter slowly thaws across the swamp, morning light again dances on the water. The same light that once made Kamira pause, lift her head, and press the shutter. Maybe she's not there anymore. Maybe she never really left. But in each rustling leaf, in each sudden lift of wings across the sky, something continues. A breath. A thought without a name. Maya has since returned to her old job. But once a month, she writes a journal entry just for Kamira. Not to heal. Not to move on, but to hold on. To a flicker of memory she's chosen to guard. You once told me, she writes, that people don't disappear when they leave. They disappear when we stop saying their name. Maya doesn't say Kamira's name aloud every day, but she remembers, and she knows others do too. 1 year after the disappearance, on a still summer afternoon, Ms. Rochelle returned to the wooden marker. She didn't cry. She simply placed a purple chrysanthemum on the ground, brushed her fingers over the kakitabatsochod, weathered inscription, and stood there in silence. No ceremony, no explanation, because for her, love needed no confirmation to be real. And loss, sometimes, was not an end, but a different form of presence. This story has no suspect, no verdict, no courtroom, no conviction. Just a young woman, a camera lens, a stretch of water, and questions no one can answer. But not everything needs to be answered. As Kamira once wrote, some places we go not to search, but to remember, not for ourselves, but for someone else someday. Kamira Johnson, born in the heart of Baltimore, vanished among the waters of Louisiana, is still here, not on a map, but in every moment when someone who knew her stops, looks toward the tree line, and sees the light catch just right. Thank you for walking with us through this journey. We are hidden echoes where the forgotten are remembered with the dignity and depth they deserve. If Kamira Johnson is an echo in the Louisiana wild, then you, the one still listening, are the reason that echo hasn't faded into silence. We'll see you again in another story, another whisper, another memory still waiting to be named.